Evening everyone, today's topic is the cave lion and its dominance in the wild, in the ancient wilderness. Basically, the cave lion, when we speak about it by its name, it's a modern relative to the modern days lions. A lot of people in the academia and in the scientific arena these days still, and even within the community of fans of animals, especially ice age animals and extinct animals, would disagree with this. But the fact of the DNA, the analysis of the DNA still proves that this animal is distant relative to modern day lions. They shared the ancestor, which is the primitive lion that existed in Africa millions of years ago. Today we are going to try to focus our scope on the cave lion versus cave bears versus wolves, dire wolves versus cave hyenas versus other animals, and mainly the carnivores. We know that cave lions were roaming in prides, and when we speak about the cave lion, we already know that this is true, that they were active and they were social just like modern day lions from the cave paintings, all cave paintings from Europe and from elsewhere, Eurasia and so on. Today, let me tell you this to all the fans out there. The cave lion, in fact, is a social animal. The cave lion is a social animal. And if we compare the cave lion to the scimitar cat, which used to dwell in the Northern American hemisphere, when we compare it to the Smilodon fatalis, or Smilodon gracilis, or Smilodon populator, all which are known as the saber-toothed cats of the North American hemisphere and the Southern Americas as well, and probably of Asia, some parts of Asia, then we see a rapid difference, a really great difference between these species. Within the cave lion subspecies, this is another proof that I use today to try to prove that it's indeed a relative to modern day lions. If we look at the subspecies of the cave lion, what we realize is an impressive thing. Within the subspecies of the cave lion, the biological diversity of these animals were of great importance and of great spreading across its lineage, across its blood. What we used to have is the Siberian cave lion, North American cave lion, Eurasian cave lion, and of course elsewhere used to be so many species. One notable example is the northeastern Siberian cave lion, and this lion was of a magnificent proportions and magnificent strength and magnificent, yet still when it's compared to the North American lion, it is actually of moderate weight and bulk. Yet the encounters between the northeastern Siberian lion, cave lion, and the Siberian tiger probably occurred on the late Pleistocene. Well, for this, we know that the Siberian tiger used to exist in the Siberian wilderness, and probably it came to meet the Siberian cave lion. However, what I would argue here as a case is that lions are steppe animals. They live in the savannas, while tigers, although known to live in areas similar to savannas, do not actually dwell in savannas, but do dwell in shrub and in thorny, forests, in thick forests. For example, what we see these days in India and elsewhere all supports the fact that these animals, if supposedly they came into facing one another, which probably happened, they did so not on regular basis, but rather on incidents, on coincidences, if I may say here. The cave lion is really powerful. Now just to reinforce this position as a fan of both the lion and tiger and the cave lion, I would say that the cave lion was the biggest of all felines. Because if we look at the North American lion, what we realize is something out of the ordinary. The 400 kilograms plus is something that is unique to the cave lion. Probably this animal was the biggest of all felines. And in some cases, some people would try to argue that the saber-toothed cats are heavier than the cave lion. It's not true 100%, although we cannot be truly speculative in a very precise manner when it comes to the weights. For indeed, the scimitar cats, especially the saber-toothed cats, which are totally different from the scimitar cats. Now we are speaking only about the saber-toothed cats, like the ones I mentioned earlier in this video, the Smilodon fatalis, Smilodon populator, and Smilodon gracilis. All of these animals, if you look at them, especially the Smilodon populator, was the heaviest of all of them. Smilodon populator would have weighted approximately the same as a modern, probably modern day tiger, plus I would say that it, in certain cases, would have weight just like modern day lion, an African lion or Asiatic lion. But to say that these animals are heavier than the cave lions is something that is not true. Actually, it does not have any. It has no scientific grounds whatsoever, because the recorded weights of the lions these days sometimes would reach 350 in male lions, and in cave lions, when the analysis were done on the skeletons, all the conclusions that scientists came to proves that these animals are at least 350 kilograms up to 400 and even 430 kilograms. So by conclusion, the cave lion, especially the subspecies of cave lion, the North American cave lion, the Panthera leoatrox, which means the awesome and fearful giant American, big cat or panther, which actually a lion proven by the DNA, all proves to us that if these animals were in groups, now, how would I say that they are social and they had prides? Now, just to pinpoint that this is true is to look beyond just history. It is to look deeper into the paleontology and into the biological history and the evolutionary history of some species other than just the carnivores themselves. Now, looking at the steep bison, which used to exist almost 11 to 13,000 years ago, if we look at that animal, it gave way to two species. One of them is the bison, which is the North American bison, the American bison, which is found these days in the Yellowstone National Park. When we look at this animal, what we see is something that is really impressive. Now, in ancient ice age times, late ice age times, before roughly 13,000 years ago, before the bison gave way to these two animals, it was actually bigger and more powerful than modern day bison and heavier. And I would say that this animal that used to exist and to dominate the grasslands of North America would require an animal like the North American lion to bring it down in prides. Why would I say so? Why would I say so is based on two scientific reasons. And I find myself in not only a position defending the facts of scientists who discovered these things, but actually defending and reinforcing the position of these scientists at the same time. Scientists who discovered the analysis after analyzing the skeletons and the bodies and the remains of the North American lions and cave lions in general, in paleontology and in biology and so on, and the Animal Academia of Science, have discovered that the cave lion is in fact distant relative to the modern day lions. When we say modern day lions, we mean the African lions and the Asiatic lions still found in India. And if we say that they are distant relatives, this implies that they shared the evolutionary history, which gives us an example enough to support the reasons that would resonate to us that these animals were basically social animals, and then that they hunted in prides and so on. Now, just to pinpoint exactly this, you can look at the DNA studies that are conducted in Europe and elsewhere and in Siberia of the latest found animals, of the latest found remains like the cubs that were found in the permafrost and so on, like we mentioned in the previous videos. In this series, we are still piecing together the identity of the cave lion. And one of the things that I do when I piece together identity through history, I read history, I read the studies like the paleontologist studies and the biological analysis and the museum studies and the academia of museum, studies. And what I would also reinforce this series to piece together the identity of the cave lion is to look at its dominance in the wild, and that's the subject of this video here. By referring to the cave lion as a hunter and as an obligate carnivore, which means that it solely relies on meat as a carnivore, solely relies on meat entirely to live and to have a diet, to provide diet. Now, if we compare this animal when it used to hunt bisons, whether in the Asian Northern Hemisphere or in the Northern American Hemisphere or in Eurasian hemispheres or even in European hemispheres, and in areas and environments, we would realize that just like today's lions, these animals would come in ferocious fights and sometimes in contact with other carnivores, and this is typical of any other carnivore. Now, if we look at carnivores, in order for a carnivore to prove itself, it needs to take an order, meaning it needs to secure itself in the order of the carnivores, in the order of predatory cycle, which is the food cycle of the nature and of the environment in which it lives at. And this implies that the cave lion, which shared its habitat absolutely with a lot of other species of animals like dire wolves in the Northern American Hemisphere, dire wolves, short-faced bears, brown bears, even scimitar cats, even smilodon saber-toothed cats, even with other, gray wolves, even with, other animals in Eurasia like cave hyenas and gray wolves once again, and also some other animals. If we speak about probably long times ago, then even the giant cheetah, even other animals that existed in this time span with the cave lions. And one of these animals also is the tiger. The tiger used to exist with these animals. And I would say that the saber-toothed tiger is actually Smilodon. The saber-toothed tiger, which sometimes we see in the films, is not exactly a true identity of an old animal. There used to be no tiger with long saber-toothed cats species within this species, meaning there used to be no saber-toothed cats that are tigers. Tigers were never ever saber-toothed cats, meaning they were the biggest tiger that was ever found is the tiger that was found in Asia through paleontology, and it's so heavy. This tiger would really match the cave lion in weight, but still the cave lion takes its feline kingdom on the heaviest, as the heaviest feline ever to exist. And this, combined with the fact that it was a social animal from the cave paintings and from some analysis, would give us enough reasons to believe that this animal dominated, just like modern day lions dominated a lot of the environments in which it lived at. Now, just referring back to the video, I would like to try to focus more on the tigers also, to piece together what the identity of the lion and the tiger is. You know, if you look at some films like, for example, I think 11,000 BC, that film, where there are, saber-toothed cats colored in tiger camouflage, in tiger patterns, I would say that these animals are not necessarily true, because I know we still have a problem with some animals. How were they like colored? I know we still have this problem, but to be honest, up to now, these animals, I would say that because the scientists who discovered the scimitar cats family and the saber-toothed cats family know for certainty from their own scientific basically reasoning and knowledge, that this family is totally different from the family of the tigers and the lions. And this gives us enough reason to say that saying that there used to be a saber-toothed tiger is not true at all, unless we come in a point where we really know that these animals were colored in the pattern of today's tigers, which is not closer to reality. And even if it was, these animals are not tigers. So I would like to say, referring back to the video, that the cave lion, which used to live in prides in the savannah and in the grasslands of the northern hemisphere in general, in the Ice Age, 11,000 to 13,000 years ago, was an animal capable of holding itself against most of the carnivores. And referring to the cave bear was an omnivore to begin with. So it would imply to us that this animal would have had, which absolutely is still found in the paleontology sites. Paleontologists are piecing together the identity of the cave bear in a way and in a manner reflective of this animal. And we would say that the cave bear, as an omnivore, does not own the same serrated teeth and canines as that of the cave lion, which is an obligate carnivore in the identity. Although we don't respect, nor do we in any way in this video, in this commentary, undermine or underestimate the power and the sheer strength and the dentistry of the cave bear. But to be honest, if you look at animals like the tiger and the lion of today, the lion and the tiger are, armed with very serrated teeth. And the tiger has the longest canine between all living modern felines also, and also maybe close. And the lion is following. So I would say that the cave lion would perhaps would be similar to today's lions, because when we look at the skeletons, just this skeleton, for example, here, we see that this skeleton is representative of what? Of a cave lion indeed. Yes, it is a cave lion. Now, what is this? The second skeleton. Now, this is a modern day lion. You see, they are truly similar. And this is another reason, like I mentioned in the previous video of the series, that the cave lion is in fact an obligate carnivore of the family of the lions, and so it is a distant relative of modern day lions, and it is similar in many ways, and we can piece together what this animal would have looked like based on the animals of today, the modern lions, in some retrospect. The perspective from which I am, making this commentary comes from studies conducted by scientists and from science, and it's not only my own personal opinion as a lion fan. As a lion and a cave lion fan, I do find it very important to try to enlighten the people about this animal and how it used to be. If we suppose that the cave lion and the cave bear came into contact and they fought against each other, we would conclude that the cave lion were more than just capable of holding itself against any other animal. And this means that in certain cases, like we still find today, lions dying, cave bears dying from conflicts, cave hyenas dying, perhaps they died in incidents or even in locked conflicts, brawls, stuff like that, war. We will never know, probably. But one thing is true. To look at skeletons of animals, like what is mentioned in one of the latest studies, and to look at these skeletons and the bones and to realize that there are some bite marks from other animals that fits into the category of the dentistry of the cave lion or the cave bear, this gives us enough reason to believe that they killed one another in attempts of predatory attempts or even in, competition. When we look today at the Northern American hemisphere, we don't see much diversity like we used to have 11 to 13,000 years ago. We only these days have wolverines, gray wolves, brown bears, even black bears, I think. We also have the coyote wolves, coyotes, some foxes, and some other animals. It's not much these days, especially when we speak about the carnivores. Long ago, before the Ice Age ended, the modern day representative and equivalent of modern day lion, the North American lion, was in the Northern American continent. It was in the Caucasian lands, in Eurasia, in elsewhere around the world. It was also the saber-toothed cat Smilodon populator in the Northern American hemisphere, the short-faced bear, which is one of the biggest animals to ever exist, one of the biggest bears ever. Of course, with the polar bear, which is still in existence, and the giant polar bear, which went extinct, which is one of the biggest animals and perhaps the biggest carnivore of all time, probably. I mean, terrestrial carnivore, although it was also, living in the ocean. Although when we speak about Megalodon, which is the biggest shark to ever exist and similar to today's modern day white shark, we would say maybe perhaps that was the biggest carnivore of all time. Yet, when we try to piece together what an animal would have looked like, we need to piece together different perspectives. We need to piece together and measure all the available information and try to delve deeper into other identities of animals and try to figure out how these animals would have looked like, how would they behave if they were alive, what is the most, probable lifestyles they were, having and stuff like that. So, referring to the cave lion, which is a magnificent and very interesting, very captivating animal, and knowing that it was social, at least in Eurasia and in Northern America, and knowing that it hunted animals like the bison and the moose and the giant elk deer and stuff like that, then we know that this animal was similar to modern day lions in their dominance in the savannas, and it perhaps dominated so many animals. Now, just referring back to the video, the scimitar cats and the saber-toothed cats were not entirely social, and it's not yet proven, unlike lions. Perhaps if they were social or not, we will never know. But I don't think they were social, because there is no paintings, there is no indication of whatsoever sort or resource that tells us that these animals were social. Unlike cave lions, which were social, these animals would have probably been solitary animals. And I am not sure about this, because this is still debatable within the arena of science and biology and paleontology. So, and in giant animals science, I would say that a pride of cave lions, North American cave lions, that ranged in weights from 280 kilograms to 400 kilograms, is a formidable foe to any other animal, any other carnivore. If we just speculate any fights between a short-faced bear and these animals, the cave lions, we would be certain that the cave lions would have held their grounds in front of the cave bears or even the short-faced bear, because these animals were solitary while the cave lions were social, and implying the fact that these animals, the cave lions, were roughly half that or even quarter the weight of the cave bears, then they would compensate for that in their groups. And you know, the cats are really formidable animals in the dentistry, and the canines, the serrated canines they have, in the claws they have, the paws, they are very formidable animals. And I would say that the cave lions were able to basically hunt big animals, and for certainty these animals would have held their grounds against short-faced bears, and maybe only in some specific situations they would have given their grounds. They would have given up their situation and their carcasses and their food and their hunting to prey to the short-faced bear. So I would like also to say that Smilodon populator, which probably wasn't any social animal at all, probably would not be able to fight against a pride of social North American cave lions or any other cave lions. Even tigers would have not stood any chance against a pride of cave lions like northeastern Siberian cave lions, for that matter. I would like also to say that looking at the cave lions, now some of you would say also it applies to cave lions. Perhaps they were not social. I do take that in mind. I keep that in mind also. And I would say that also these animals also are proven by two cases, by two examples, by two scientifically enough proven reasons, proven facts. One is the documentation of all the humans, the cave people, who drew basically prides of cave lions, and that's enough for us to say that that is a documentation of history that tells us that these animals were basically social, and it is a human civilized documentation. The other one is coming out of the fact that the cave lions are all subspecies of lion, Panthera leo, and they share the bloodline with the with the African lions and the Asiatic lions of today, although different they may be. So in general, I would say that the cave lion, if we imagine an animal capable of holding itself in prides like modern day lions, which will hardly give up to any group of hyenas, even in big numbers, especially when at the attendance and with the presence of with a male lion. When we realize that even leopards are basically kept out of the competition in most, if you look at the forest of Gir in northwestern India, you see that leopards are not in any position capable of competing against lions, and they would take up to trees when they are faced by lionesses, let alone male lions, male Asiatic, Indian, Persian lions. And if we also consider the fact that the cheetah, whether the the Asiatic cheetah, which used to exist in the Indian wilderness, and it's still existing in Iran these days, had no chance against Asiatic lions, and even the African cheetah has no chance against African lions, and even the leopards, the African leopards, have no chance against African lions, although powerful they might be, however big they are and tough and muscular and bulky and all that stuff, they are not matched to a male lion or a female lion. Also, if we look at other animals that perhaps were alive at the time, and are still actually, and probably were at the time, overlapping in territories with cave lions in the Caucasian wilderness, like the Eurasian cave lion in Eurasia, the modern day Caucasian leopard, the Eurasian leopard, which is still in existence in the forests of Russia, the Amur leopard. If we look at the Amur leopard, it has no chance against the group of cave lions or even Asiatic lions, which once dominated most of Asia, even in the Caucasus, in Greece, in Turkey, in Iraq, in Middle East, in even Iran, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and in elsewhere. So I would like to say that an animal like the lion gives us all enough reasons from the analysis of the skeletons, and these are some studies. If we look here at some of these studies, I will leave you with these studies that proves enough, details about the cave lion's identity, and this supports the fact that this animal was able to hold itself against cave bears or any big carnivores, and probably it was a dominant animal in its hemisphere and in its environment and in its habitat. And basically, I would like to conclude this video with some nice studies, and I will make and I'm making actually some written analysis also with the music. And with that being said, I hope to see you in the next episode of the Cave Lion, piecing together the identity. And with that being said, peace. Abdullah speaking.